You know that feeling, right? You're stuck in traffic, again, wondering why your city just keeps sprawling outwards while the cost of living just keeps going up. It's a frustration we all feel. But what if the problem isn't just a few bad decisions, but the entire operating system our cities are built on? Well, let's dive into how Aotearoa, New Zealand, is attempting a radical reboot of that exact system.
So check this out. What you're looking at are basically two different futures. On the left, you've got what the source material calls gray inertia. Think asphalt deserts, clogged motorways, endless suburbs. And on the right, you've got green resilience, a future with vibrant, mixed-use neighborhoods, great public transit, and urban forests. The whole point of this new planning bill is to literally force cities to shift from the left side of this picture to the right.
You see, for decades, the old system, the Resource Management Act, is what created that gray inertia. It was a state of, well, bureaucratic stagnation, a fancy way of saying everything got stuck. It led to this car-dependent sprawl that created a huge regulatory debt. It's kind of like racking up credit card debt, but for an entire city, with infrastructure that was never meant to last.
So this new Aotearoa planning bill, it's not just a small update, not even close. The sources are calling it a BIOS flash for the urban operating system. For you tech folks, you know what that means. It's a deep, fundamental rewrite of the city's core code, and it's heavily inspired by Japan's super successful land use law from all the way back in 1974. This is a complete system overhaul designed to rewire how cities grow from the ground up.
Which brings us to our first big takeaway. And to really get what this law is doing, you've got to stop thinking about your city as just a bunch of streets on a map. You have to start seeing it as a machine.
Okay, stick with me, because this metaphor is everything. It's called the hydraulic city. Just picture it. The city center is this big container. Land values go through the roof, right? Well, that's like a giant piston coming down, putting massive pressure on everyone living there. They're the fluid in this machine. And what happens when you've got all that pressure and no strong container? You get a leak. And that leak, well, that's urban sprawl.
So how do you plug the leak? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, the bill's answer is actually pretty simple. In concept at least. You build a dam, an urban dam. This graphic lays it out perfectly. The whole idea is to contain that pressure, to create a hard stop boundary for growth. It forces all that development energy back into a serviced reservoir, a place where transit and pipes and all that stuff already exist. It's designed to kill that speculative sprawl dead.
All right, on to our second big takeaway. And this one, well, this one's all about bringing radical order to absolute, complete chaos.
Get ready for this number. Seriously, over 1,175. That's how many different, often conflicting, local planning zones were running the show under the old system. It's no wonder the sources call it a postcode lottery. It literally meant the rules for building something could be totally different just by crossing the street.
And you can imagine what a mess that was. It wasn't just confusing, it created something called a nitpicking trap. Think about it. Instead of talking about big, important stuff like where a new train line should go, planners and developers were literally stuck arguing over like the style of a doorknob. A total waste of time, money, and energy.
So, what's the fix for that 1,000-plus zone mess? This. They're slashing it all down to about 20. 20, that's it. From over 1,000 to around 20. It's a jaw-dropping simplification, and it's meant to bring absolute certainty to the system. And this image just nails the concept. You're going from a box of jumbled, random puzzle pieces to a clean, ordered grid. They're calling it a universal code base for development. What that means is a specific zone in, say, Auckland will have the exact same rules as that same type of zone in Christchurch. The whole game changes from begging for subjective permission to just objectively following the code. If you tick the boxes, you build. Simple as that.
Okay. Now we get to what might be the most surprising and maybe the most controversial piece of this whole puzzle. It completely flips the script on who's responsible when new development meets existing industry.
Yeah, this quote from the source docs really sums up the new philosophy. The idea is to stop fighting things out in court and start solving problems with smart engineering. And the tool they use to do this is something they call the newcomer principle.
So what does that actually mean? Let's paint a picture. A developer wants to build a fancy new apartment building right next to a busy, noisy port that's been operating for 100 years. Under the newcomer principle, the burden to deal with the noise is 100% on the developer. The port, as an existing part of the economy, gets to keep on doing its thing, protected.
And his duty to mitigate isn't just a suggestion. It means real physical changes. We're talking super thick, soundproof windows, mandatory acoustic glazing, advanced ventilation systems. Essentially, the developer has to engineer the conflict away. But, this brings up a really thorny question that's at the heart of the debate. Are we prioritizing economic efficiency by making people live in these perfectly engineered but totally sealed boxes?
And that question really gets us to the absolute core of this whole thing. Because when you strip it all away, this bill is forcing a huge choice. It's the great urban trade-off. So you've got two very different ways of looking at this. Vision A says, look, the old system was a broken machine, and this is a desperately needed fix. It gives our cities a strong skeleton to grow on and creates a market that actually works. But then you've got Vision B. They see this as a super high-risk, terrifying experiment that prioritizes machine-like efficiency over a city's actual soul. They worry we'll end up with cities that are functional but sterile.
But the people who support this plan have a pretty powerful counterargument. They say this new system completely redefines what a city even is. It's a living, biological habitat. And here's the kicker. They argue that gray assets, your pipes, your roads, they lose value over time. They're a liability. But green utility, we're talking trees, parks, green roofs, those are appreciating assets. They actually become more valuable over time.
And when they say valuable, they mean it in dollars and cents. I mean, look at these numbers from the source material. A potential 50% savings on the capital cost of pipes. For every dollar spent on maintaining trees, you get $3 back in benefits. And get this, a massive 1 to 18 social return on investment, just from better public health and more walkable neighborhoods. That's a really powerful financial case for going green.
So that's what it all boils down to, right? On one hand, this new system is promising amazing things. Efficiency, certainty, a greener, more resilient future. But there's a price. The trade-off is giving up that fine-grained local control for a top-down, standardized system. And that leaves us with the big, final question that hangs over all of this. Is Aotearoa really ready to live inside this new, highly engineered machine?